Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As you know, my name is Bobby Sulecki, and I'll be presenting today about Erie's Polonia. Just a few quick things. I'm only going up till 1966, except for a brief moment at the end when I speak about Polish radio broadcasting. I will also not be talking about anything currently going on. That being said, this is a quote from a famous Polish poet, Czesław Miłosz, and it is the living ode to those who could no longer speak to tell their story for them. And those words really speak to me because, for example, I'm third generation Polish American. People who are third and fourth generations of anything, they're so far removed from the original ancestors that they don't even realize or care about a lot of things. So they just don't identify with it, and I am presenting this so it is not forgotten. Before I get into Erie's Polish community, just a brief background about Poland and what was going on and why they came. So the history of Poland is set to start in 966 AD with the baptism of their king, King Mieszko, which then he converted all the people from paganism to Christianity. And that's a famous painting of what the event may have looked like. Poland, for many years in Europe, was a very powerful country. In fact, as you can see on this map, it was about the size of what France is today. But over time, things happened, invasions and such. And in 1772, Russia, Prussia, and Austria decided to take pieces of Poland for themselves. Now, some of I should also mention, going back, that Poland was also shared a king with Lithuania, so they were kind of combined for a while. It was known as the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. So the first partition was 1772. Then again, 1793, which is when they revolted, which resulted in 1795. There was no Poland. And from 1795 to 1901, Poland, in name, did not exist. You couldn't find it on a map. You couldn't find it on a globe, and a lot of people were persecuted against for their Catholic religion, or even for speaking Polish, depending which partition you lived in. I'm not going to get into all that. So they always considered themselves Polish, never Russian, Austrian, or German. They were Polish, and that was it. So why did the Poles come to America? Well, a lot of them, they weren't coming, interestingly enough, because America was free. They were looking for work. They would call it for bread, or in Polish, za chlebem. And they started coming in waves in the late 1860s. And this happened to be going on in Erie. In the first Poles in Erie, they worked for the railroads, factories, and docks. There was no Polish Catholic Church, so they attended St. Mary's on East 9th Street. Yes, St. Mary's used to have onion domes. And just a side note for any gals that attended St. Ben's, that's the original St. Ben's next to St. Mary's. So what had happened was more and more Polish people started coming, and they would send priests in from Buffalo, Dunkirk, and Cleveland to hear confessions, have mass. And one of the priests told them, "I think there's enough people here for you to have your own church." So they approached Bishop Mullen of the Erie Catholic Diocese, and in 1884, he blessed the first St. Stanislaus Church. However, this church was built all by volunteers. The rectory's in the back. However, the bishop could not find a Polish priest right away, so the Benedictines from St. Mary's kind of took care of it. And then what was going on, there was a seminary in Belgium, Louvain, Belgium, that was training priests specifically to come to America. And the bishop asked, "Do you have any Polish priests, in the seminary?" And they said yes, and they sent Father Andrew Ignatiak over right after ordination. In fact, his famous quote is, "I was pastor of St. Stanislaus before I was ordained." This is the first church. This is the inside of the first church. Those two statues of Blessed Mother and Child and Sacred Heart, I believe, are still the same ones in the present church currently, but they are painted white. So Erie's first Polish neighborhood was called Stanisławo. What they would do is they would name their neighborhoods after where they lived. Like, you run it into somebody Polish, you ask, "Where do you live?" They don't say, like, "I live East 13th Street." I live in Stanisławo, or the district of St. Stanislaus, or whatever parish you happen to belong to. So August 22nd, the church was started in 1884. August 22nd, 1886, Father Ignatiak came, built a rectory, or else he'd have no place to live. And the first thing he did, it was very important to him for the children to have education. So he turned over 2 rooms in his rectory for a school. And he was their teacher for the first year. There was about 70 kids that year. Now, Father Ignatiak, later Monsignor, as you will see, was probably the most influential person in all of Erie's early Polonia. So he wanted to build a real school, so he bought 6 lots and on the corner of 12th and Wallace, built a 2-story wooden school, and he hired an organist, Professor John Novak, who's on the side there, who also became the teacher. So they both taught school. That picture is actually from the early 1890s. Interesting side note: Professor Novak ended up marrying Father Ignatiak's sister. So things worked out pretty well for him. And John Novak, here he is. He was very much into the cultural life. He was from Poland, but he grew up in Dunkirk, New York, came here, and he started what is now the Monusco Singing Society. But they were started as a singing society and library, and they probably would have no idea about that now. In 1889, Father Ignatiak purchased an acre of land at Trinity Cemetery. So St. Stan's at Trinity Cemetery on West 8th, they have their own section, and it's a one-way street, and there are so many graves there. I don't even know if it's known everybody that's buried there, because a lot of the original graves were wooden and over time, disintegrated. This is next slide here. This is just what a typical house look like. This is a house along East 13th Street. I believe that's from the Balbuza family, and this is just showing you basically the kind of house they lived in. So you get the idea, and they all, most of them had huge families and small houses. So how they did it, I don't know. But St. Stan's was growing to the point where the church was too small. It was overcrowded. The immigrants kept coming. So in 1894, they actually moved the wooden church a lot over and started construction on the present St. Stanislaus. And it took from 1895 to 1898 to build it. Now, I'm going to show you something interesting here. When this picture was taken, I don't know if you could notice, the steeples weren't ready yet. So they drew them in, and this is the result. In the corner, you could see the old church on the side there. Here are some of the original windows from the 1890s that are still in the church. This was donated by the Winooshko Club. They donated all the windows at the entrances. This is a window of a Polish saint, St. Hyacinth, and that was donated by Father Ignatiak and his sister. And the windows, in case anybody wants to know, were made in Buffalo, New York by the Buffalo Stained Glass Works. New Year's Day, 1900, there was a fire in the sacristy. They think it was caused by incense that was used earlier in the day during Mass. And the only thing in the sacristy that survived the fire was this piece of vestment depicting St. Stanislaus. So that's been sitting in the sacristy framed for years. 1901, they decided they needed a new school, so St. Stanislaus School was built. The building is still there. And he had, during his time, Father Ignatiak, besides John Novak, hired the Felician sisters to teach, because there were so many kids in school. Now, keep in mind, Ignatiak's been there since 1886. It's 1904 now. He's been doing this all by himself. 1904, he finally gets an assistant, Father Francis Robaczewski. So if you think about, he had help from the parishioners, obviously, but he was in charge on his own. In 1905, he built a church hall, which is still the hall today. Kosciuszko Hall was named after General Thaddeus Kosciuszko, who was a hero in the American Revolution, fought with George Washington, and then later went back to Poland to fight for their independence. And here is the cornerstone of Kosciuszko Hall. 1915, Father Ignatius replaced the Felician sisters with the Sisters of the Holy Family of Nazareth because, for lack of better words, he thought they could do a better job. This, I just have some random pictures here for the time period. This is from the 25th Jubilee of St. Stan's. That's 1909. That's Ignatius in the middle. It's somehow through trick, like some kind of trick photography, whatever they had back then, they were able to superimpose the old church and Bishop Mullen in on the picture, and that, I believe, was taken in front of the school. That's the Jubilee Committee. Now, for 1 second, we're going to have some fun here. I want to ask if you notice anything. Look at Father Ignatius in his picture. And I'm going to go to the next picture, and you tell me if you notice any difference. Yes, he for whatever reason he bought a toupee, and at the time, this is a true story. I don't know which paper, I don't know who had it. There was a Polish newspaper in Erie, and they printed an editorial stating something to the effect of, last week we had our beloved pastor in church. This week a monkey said mass at the altar. Father Ignatius had the paper shut down. And that was the end of that. The assistant next to him in this picture is Father Stephen Sulecki, who was later at St. Casper's. This is a school picture from 1918. Also, you could kind of see what the classes were like, what the desks were like, how the kids were dressed. Also, in 1918, he got an assistant of Father Vladislav Steincheck, and he started collecting money to build a boys' club, which was the CYMA, or Eastside Catholic Club. And they also had a high school inside it. Father Ignatius built it to keep the boys out of trouble. But it was open to all Catholic boys in the city. Plus they had a high school which was very small. Here's just in the brochure like what some of the things it offered: swimming and bowling and stuff like that. This is one of the high school yearbooks. And what I find fascinating about it is you look at these yearbooks, and they're all like about being literary and proper and intelligent, unlike any of the yearbooks from my time. You could see, okay, there's that Ignatius was teaching, so was Steincheck. Here's what the staff of the yearbook look like. That's the editorial staff. For those of you from, say Casper's, Joseph Kasprowicz became a priest. For those of you from St. Hedwig's, Louis Kozłowski later became a priest. And yeah, Father Louis. And then they would do things like everybody in the senior class had a poem they would write, which I think is interesting. This is a basketball team they had at the time, a girls basketball team, the St. Stanislaus Pioneers. This is the boys basketball team. Does anybody from St. Stan's recognize the person, the blonde-haired person in the middle. Yes, yes, that's Father Joe. Well, later Father Joe Ladashevsky. He apparently was a very good basketball player. And this is just basically, I was showing how they basically laid out their yearbook. And they even had people writing poetry in the yearbook. Father, who was Louis Kozlowski, who was later Father Louis, wrote poems, which I didn't know until I found that. This is one of the graduating classes. 1930, and this is what it looked like around 1922. That's how many assistants he had. Archbishop Gannon, obviously, Father Ignatiuk, Father Poole, and Father Peter Dubinsky. This is the choir from 1924. This is a postcard of what the interior of the church looked like around that time. It looks like that now, and it doesn't. That's the best way I could explain that. In 1928, Father Ignatiuk had the honor of being named Monsignor, and back then, to be named a Monsignor, especially if you're Polish, that was a huge deal. They had celebrations and everything. And he's the first Polish Monsignor in the Erie diocese. This is him. It is 1933. He's in Corpus Christi procession, and that's his last procession, because in June of '33 he became ill, but recovered enough to keep on working. And in December of '34, he had the Jubilee anniversary Mass and Christmas Eve midnight Mass at St. Stan's, even though he could barely walk up the altar. He died December 29th, 1934, so he died right after Christmas. This is his funeral. When he died, St. Stan's had more than 1,000 families, and it was one of the largest parishes in the diocese. They say that he built St. Stan's from nothing, and it is said that when they were building a church, he was doing some of the work himself, and the onlookers were telling him to get off because they were afraid he was going to fall off the ladder. When he died, there was 1,026 children enrolled at St. Stanislaus School. He is responsible too for the founding of every other Polish parish in the diocese, and he founded Holy Family Church for the Slovak people. And this is his grave at Trinity Cemetery, which you could see that crucifix for miles if you're there. And he's surrounded by his brother, Polish priest. So then his assistant, Father Steinczyk, became pastor. And this is in the early 40s. He did a church renovation. And here's 1949, Father Steinczyk became a Monsignor. And I'm just going to show some random pictures, because he was a very, very tall man. And these are some pictures of him with kids. These kids are in Polish costume. Now, he died September 25th, '62. He was only 68 years old. And the next pastor was this man, Father Joseph Nadashevsky. Which is interesting about him is that he was a native son of St. Stanislaus, and usually the bishop does not send you to your home parish, but he did for Father Joe Nadashevsky, and he had the interior renovated in '63, did maintenance project for the school property, and he was very well known for his devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Now, before we leave St. Stan's, every year since probably the 1890s, St. Stan's had a Corpus Christi procession. For those of you that don't know what it is, Corpus Christi is the body and blood of Christ, and the feast days usually in June, depending when Easter happens. And they had a procession through the neighborhood. And these are pictures from 1938. And I will show you because you can see how packed it was. The ladies in capes are from the Polish Women's Alliance. And there's girls from Fidelity carrying banners. There is the canopy of which the priest would carry the monstrance holding the Eucharist. I can't tell who the priest is because he's blocked, but the celebrant of Corpus Christi was never the pastor. Okay, so now we move on to Holy Trinity, or as they called it back in the day, Troitsovo. Holy Trinity, what had happened was, in the early 1890s, a group of people, the Thaddeus Kosciuszko Alliance of the Thaddeus Kosciuszko Society of the Polish National Alliance, decided they wanted another church. They went to Father Ignatiuk. He said, no, because I'm building a new church. So they waited, and in 1901, they petitioned Bishop Fitzmaurice for a new parish. What this is, okay, St. John the Baptist on 26th Street built a new church that's there now. Holy Trinity bought their old church and moved it by horse and wagon to 22nd and Reed. And here is the interior of the first Holy Trinity Church. That was, the first Mass was held December 6, 1903. This is Father Vincent Matishek. He was the first pastor of Holy Trinity. Unfortunately, he did not last long. He helped build a new rectory, and he had gone to take a bath. He had other priests visiting, and nobody heard from him, and they found him on the floor gasping for air, and he died the next morning of carbon monoxide poisoning from a defective water heater. So he didn't even last a year, and he was only 35 when he died. So then the pastor became, and I'm going to say his full name for effect, Father Severin Erasmus Nedbalski. And he was a classmate of Father Matishek's. So that's how he got in the Holy Trinity. In 1906, for $1, he bought a lot at Trinity Cemetery for the Holy Trinity parishioners, because I'm just going to say there was a little rivalry between St. Stan's and Holy Trinity. They did not want to be buried in the St. Stan's section. This is a school picture, I believe, about 1922 or so. And yes, Nedbalski also decided to have a toupee. I don't know what was going on. This picture, in 1925, they bought the Baptist church next door and made it their rectory. And I just want to digress for a minute for this picture. This is 1933. General Haller, who was commander of the Polish army during World War I, came to Erie for a visit. And those are the Polish veterans and Father Dedbalski and the Ladies Auxiliary in front of Holy Trinity's rectory. General Haller's in the middle, Dr. Michalowski's sitting next to Father Cebulski. And the woman, I keep looking at this picture, in the woman, the tall woman standing there, the more I look at it, the more I think that is my grandfather's mother, because she was in the Ladies Auxiliary for the Polish Vets Club. But and I'm pretty sure that's her. And I'm just so fascinated with this because I found it in the archives here at Hagen. So so here's just a class picture, 1940, Father Dedbalski, Father Cebulski. Here's the original church. Then finally, 1940, they decide it's time to build a new church. And this is the building committee. It was dedicated on Trinity Sunday, June 8th of 1941. Also, that same year, Father, they have the cornerstone for the first church and the current church. And here's the present Holy Trinity. Also, that same year, Father Dedbalski became a Monsignor. And even though he was sickly in later years, he still continued to work, because these old priests never heard of retirement. In fact, this is a picture, a very rare candid photo I have of Father Cebulski, his assistant, helping Monsignor Dedbalski walk for a procession. And he died on February 12th, 1948. He was 82 years old. He was also national chaplain for the Polish Falcons of America. And this is his grave in the Holy Trinity section of Trinity Cemetery. He's buried next to Father Batishek, the first pastor, who's in the middle, and another priest. So he died, and Father John Mieczkowski became pastor. And when he came, Holy Trinity did not have stained glass windows. So he raised money to have them installed. This is one of them. And this is a window he had installed in memory of Monsignor Dedbalski. This is the convent, which is actually the original rectory, which he had brick veneered. This is what Holy Trinity looked like during his time as pastor. Those two murals on the side, I have no clue what happened to them. He also built the social hall, and if any of you've been to Zabava, you've been there, and he donated $100,000 of his own money to build it. At 53, he was made a Monsignor. However, September 4th, 1959, he was waiting for a haircut at Steve's barber shop on 18th and Parade Street when he suddenly slumped forward in his chair and died of a heart attack. He so much to his personal happiness, Father Joseph Cebulski, who was at Dedbalski's assistant, who was at St. Hedwig's, he came back to Holy Trinity, and this is his big welcome home party that they had. These are just a few pictures of the Holy Trinity neighborhood. This is, like every nice Polish girl wearing their babushkas, and since people don't know what the nuns used to look like, these are the Felician nuns. This is a fashion show that Young Ladies Fidelity had, and they got their clothes from learners on State Street. If anybody remembers that. Leaving Holy Trinity, we go to St. Hedwig's or Jawigowo. They were Polish people started settling around the lakefront, and they decided that they needed a church there. So an architect, Paweł Ryś, built this church, school, and rectory, all one building. And Father Francis Robaczewski was named the first pastor. That was 1911. This is one of his vestments that used to be on display at St. Hedwig's. I don't know where it is now. And eventually he built a rectory for himself so they could have more space for the school. And then I heard somebody whisper convent, and yes, you're right, that later became the convent. He extended the school from 2 rooms to 7 rooms, and he bought a convent for the nuns on the north side of East 4th Street. Then his brother became a priest, Father Michael Robaczewski, and he became his assistant. And during this time, the parish grew to 300 families. They needed a new church. They blessed the cornerstone, but worshiped in a basement because they didn't have enough money to finish the church right away. Unfortunately, during this time, Father Robaczewski's brother Michael died at a very young age of an illness. And this is the architect's rendering of what St. Hedwig's was supposed to look like. And it does basically look like this, except for a few minor details. The architect for St. Hedwig's was a man named G.W. Stickle, who is somebody I'm doing research on. He designed many churches in Erie. He designed St. Hedwig's, Holy Trinity, St. Paul's, Holy Family, St. Julia's, Holy Rosary. And and the reason why is I think Archbishop Gannon favored him. This is a newspaper clipping of when St. Hedwig's was dedicated. Now, I grew up at St. Hedwig's, and when I was a kid and I was on the choir with my grandmother, I would stare all the time at this beautiful rose window in the choir loft, wondering what it said in Polish. Here's one of the other windows, and they were designed in Munich, Germany in 1934. There's the signature of the artist. Interesting thing about St. Hedwig's, because it was built during the Depression, Father Robaczewski somehow managed to, the streets were being paved, and he somehow managed to get the stones from the streets to build the church, and many of the parishioners helped build it. These are angels painted on the ceiling of St. Hedwig's. The story goes that the artist, whose name I could never find, painted each angel with the likeness of one of the school kids. However, I don't know if that's legend or not, because when I look at them, they all look like the same faces. And in 1938, he got an assistant, Father Louis Kozłowski, and he also taught religion at the school. 1941, they got the icon of Our Lady of Częstochowa, which you can't see at St. Hedwig's now. It's now at St. Stan's. I just want to point out that the jewels and everything were donated by families of the parish. 1944, Father Robaczewski was named Monsignor, and he died. Now this is this is where it gets interesting. He died February 21st, 1948. He was at Monsignor Dedbalski's funeral, who died a few weeks earlier. He was heading to confession when he suffered a cerebral hemorrhage and it died the next morning. And it was a big shock for the Polish community because they had 2 priests die within weeks. Interesting fact, they both had a priest friend from Buffalo who came to both funerals, and when he went back to Buffalo, he died. So Father Joseph Cebelinsky came from Holy Trinity. He was assistant to Monsignor Dedbalski, and he was pastor of the parish. He was a good manager. He started raising funds for a new school because the old school was found to be inadequate. It was actually declared a fire hazard, and the school kids referred to it as the old tin bucket, because really the front was made of tin. And this is a picture of when the school's being torn down and these girls are standing in front. I guess the school blocked out the original front entrance for what was a church. And in November of '59, Father Louis Kozłowski came back, this time as pastor. It is him with his assistant, Father Ed Beulah. And then this is the groundbreaking for the school. Way on the far end. That's my grandfather. And these are just a few random St. Hedwig's pictures. This is the class of '39, I think it is. This is the graduated class standing in front of their bulldoze school, which I thought was an interesting picture. This is the Rosy Society around 1960, and one thing the Rosy Society used to like to do was, believe it or not, put on fashion shows. And take a look at some of those hats. But this is Mary Shimshak, who was the organist for many years. She only stopped being the organist because she was walking to church and she fell and hurt her hand. So she probably would have continued otherwise. These are the ladies of the Rosy Society for the 50th anniversary of both the church and the Rosy Society. And leaving St. Hedwig's, we now go to the 4th church, St. Caspar's. St. Caspar's became, there's 3 different versions as to how St. Caspar's came about. Some say they came out of St. Stan's, some say they came out of St. Hedwig's, some say they came out of Holy Family. And I find all 3 to be correct. They were started by what is now the Hussar Club. They were called the Hussari. They were Polish cavalrymen. They were dressed in uniforms and be in procession. And but what they would do to go there is they would call their club Betlehemska, which means like a stable. So they would tell their wives they're going to go visit a nativity, so I guess their wives wouldn't know they were drinking. This is a picture of St. Caspar that's in the basement of St. Caspar's. It is St. Caspar's Church, 1914. And one of the main reasons for St. Caspar being built was hammer mill opened and General Electric opened, and people were living closer to work. And that's the reason why St. Caspar was built. A congressman, Michael Leibel Jr., donated the land for the church, and Father John Debinski was their first pastor. Now, I'm going to show you something very interesting. These are the bells inside the tower of St. Caspar's Church. These pictures were taken by a gentleman when he was in his 90s named Al Klugevich. how the heck he got up there in his 90s, I have no idea. He lived to be about 106, I think. He was the oldest man in Erie when he died. The large bell is named Casper, the middle bell is named John, and the smallest bell is named Mary. Father Dembinski had a school in the basement and bought 2 old schoolhouses for first and 8th grade classrooms. This is a couple of the windows they have at St. Casper's. This depicts the nativity, and this depicts the resurrection. Here is St. Casper's Rectory, which was across from the church. Unfortunately, 1931, Father Dembinski was riding in a car with his brother, Vincent Dembinski. It rolled off the road. He was pinned underneath, but he insisted they got help from somebody to go to St. Vincent's, and stubborn Father Dembinski, I'm just going to say it, insisted on walking up the steps to St. Vincent rather than being carried in on a stretcher. Had he not done that, he may have lived. And because he had broken ribs and he got, from the accident, and he got pneumonia. So he died from his injuries on November 16th, 1931. And here's his grave at Trinity. And what I want to put out is it says he's pastor of St. Casper's. It says a Zdrowaś Maryjo on the bottom of the grave. It's a Polish custom. If you see Zdrowaś Maryjo, which is Hail Mary, if you see that on a grave, you're supposed to pray the Hail Mary for the person in that grave. And here's a close-up of that. So the next pastor was Father Stephen Sulecki. He renovated the rectory, and here's a class picture. Here's what the church looked like during Sulecki's time. All that painting is gone now, unfortunately. In 1948, he decided to build a new school, which was much needed. His assistant was his nephew, Father Stephen Dobashevich. And here's the school. Here's a class picture. Then he built a new convent down the street, down on Hess Avenue. And these are the Sisters of the Holy Family of Nazareth that lived in the convent. He was made a Monsignor in 1954, and they presented him with this painting, which currently hangs in the basement social hall of St. Casper's. Also in that hall, it's just something I personally always loved. This is a handmade picture of Our Lady of the Rosary. Now, so Monsignor Sulecki is probably one of the nicest priests I've ever heard about. He was beloved by his parishioners. Unfortunately, in May 7th, 1967, he was handing out communion at the 5:45 a.m. Mass when he collapsed of a heart attack. And of course, like I said, I'm not going past 66, so I'm not going into the further history of St. Casper. But what many people don't know is there was a 5th Polish church in Erie, the Polish National Catholic Church. It was a movement that started in Scranton. They didn't like that they couldn't own their church property. They didn't, because in Poland they could or be in charge of their finances. They didn't understand why the bishops were Irish, why they couldn't have a Polish bishop, because they were Polish. So here's their founder, Bishop Francis Hodor, and their church was on 21st and Wallace, and little frame building, very small. That started about 1917 or so. Here's the interior. Here's the Jubilee Committee. And here's the last pastor, Father Kula. Now, what happened in 1939, like I said, they own their own property. Well, that kind of backfired for them because the guy who had the mortgage got mad at the pastor and closed the church. So, but they had a cemetery on Merline Avenue, which is pretty close. It's still in the city of Erie, not quite yet Mill Creek. And what had happened was over the years it had become overgrown, and people started complaining. So in the early 70s, the neighbors were calling the city, hey, do something about it, clean it up. So the city crews asked Mayor Tullio, what do we do with the headstones? And he goes, oh, send them down to the city dump. So, which by the way is illegal. So years later, a guy who was looking for his grandparents' grave got together with a bunch of genealogists, and they put a monument there as to who they believe is buried there. Now, if you go there, it's in a regular residential neighborhood. It's such a small plot of land. Blink, and you'll miss it. In 1966, it was a big deal. Poland, excuse me, please don't talk during my presentation. In 1966, Poland was going to celebrate their millennium, 1,000 years of being a Christian nation. Unfortunately, the communist government in Poland didn't like this. So they had celebrations here, including a big one at the cathedral. You could see it in my exhibit. And this is the Erie cover of the Erie Times News features section with the Alder Boys Nun and Our Lady of Czestochowa at St. Hedwig's. There are so many Polish clubs that and some of their histories aren't even written, so I'm just going to just read the list. Or I may not due to time constraints, but they had a group called the East Side Federation, which tried to unite people of Polish descent, promoted them to become American citizens, and so forth. And one of the leading people behind that was the man right over here, Dr. Melchior Michanowski. He was president for many years. He actually found people jobs during the Depression. And another prominent person on this, well, I'll get to that. Anyways, they had a lot of businesses, a lot of corner stores. This is Modest Brothers corner stores, and if you remember the politician from years ago, Chris Maris, that's his family. And here's an ad for the store. Probably the biggest Polish business and most well known was Stanley Brothers, corner 12th and Parade, which was founded in 1918 by a group of Polish businessmen. Now, there were no Stanley Brothers. There were just so many guys in a group named Stanley that they just decided that's what we're calling it. Directly across the street was the Bank of Erie. That was the first Polish bank in Erie. Unfortunately, that was torn down for CVS. Then there was the Lincoln Bank of Erie, which folded during the Depression. This is a picture of Bernard Venner. He was a publisher of the Polish newspaper Tribuna Polska, or Polish Tribune. And here's a copy of the paper. Here's subscription rates. And if you wondered where I got the names of the neighborhoods, this is an ad in the paper showing which stores in which neighborhood you could pick up the paper. It was a weekly. However, it folded in '39 because they couldn't keep up with printing costs because of the Depression. And this is the building on East 13th Street where the family lived and the paper was printed. Still there. It was also the Lincoln Market in the Gorney building. That's now Cobb's. In the Sulecki photo studio. After it closed, Miss Sulecki, she was married, and she had her sign out and would display pictures in the window. And that collection is here at Hagen, and I've spent much of my 2.5 years here going through it with no end in sight. So this is Fradkowiak's religious store, directly across on 13th Street from St. Stan's. And there was a Polish newspaper out of Buffalo, Polish Everybody's Daily. And my grandfather was one of the paper boys. He would pick up his papers and walk around Holy Trinity's neighborhood and deliver them. That's where he met my uncle Ted Melnick, which through her he met my grandmother. Another Polish business was Boschet's Pharmacy on 13th and Parade. This is back, when pharmacies had soda fountains. This is Edward Desser's Food Market on 14th Street. Desser's Bakery. My father's maternal side is Desser. Do not ask me how that is Polish, because we don't know. I just know that they were Polish. This is the Star Bakery. These are funeral homes. It's the Iwadowski Funeral Home, the John J. Brzezinski Funeral Home, which when he retired he sold to Edward J. Garbage, who changed his name to Gar. And of course, I know some people from the family are here. So here is the Slomsky Funeral Home, 21st in Ash Streets. And then another famous business was Crown Bottling. They made ginger ale, among other things. This is Steve's variety store across the Holy Trinity. This is Situa's Market at 3rd and Parade. Second Parade. And quickly, a quick story. It isn't absolutely true. Mrs. Situa, they lived upstairs of the store. She had given birth, and a couple hours later, got up to make sausage. So this is how dedicated they were. This is Urbaniak brothers. That's Ben Urbaniak, the founder. These are some of the businesses that were around St. Hedwig's. This is the Hess Avenue Bakery, obviously on Hess Avenue by St. Casper's. Raffles Inn, which is really Rafalovsky, that was around St. Casper's. And these are just different Polish businesses, stands that now everybody remembers because it was open 24 hours. Pogaszewski's Dry Goods, Mutual Furniture, Bossy's Cafe. This is Donakowski's store at the corner of 4th and Wallace in the early 20s. And a couple people I just want to make mention of. You had Dr. Schubert, Dr. Stegelski, he was a dentist, and Dr. Babovich, he was a dentist. We had lawyers. Francis T. Degorski was the first. John Ignatiuk, who is Monsignor Ignatiuk's brother, Adam Gorski, and Andrew Novak. Now we're getting to the last portion of my program here. It's a subject near and dear to my heart: Polish music and Polish radio broadcasting. This is the White Eagle Band of 1895, and I'm sure many of you here have fond memories of hearing them. This is Ignaz Chojnacki's band. He he is somehow a distant cousin to me. My grandfather played accordion, so I have his sheet music. And this is some of the sheet music he had, and it's stamped for Blasco's accordion shop, that one. That's stamped for Oseki's. I'm sure most people will remember Oseki Brothers. Oseki and Joe Rodney later had his own store on Parade Street. And apparently, I guess you have to be very good, but it only takes a few weeks to learn accordion. So now for something that besides the churches that I'm very passionate about, it is very personal to me. When radio came to Erie in the early 20s, late 20s, early 30s, there were a few stations that did not survive for financial reasons, but they did carry Polish programs. I don't know who had the programs, but in 1935, when WLEU started in the Commerce Building, a man named Joe Zdunski had the show. And at first, the music was live orchestra. Later, he switched to records like everybody else, and he would announce weddings, anniversaries, birthdays, and deaths on his show. He would also endorse local politicians. And he had the show from 1935 to 1968. In 1968, a man bought the program named Peter Gardowski. And if I may digress for a minute, this man has been my hero since I was 5. I admire him so much, not just because of the radio show. He was taken to Siberia during World War II. He walked from Siberia through Palestine and Persia, eventually making his way to Italy to fight in the Battle of Monte Cassino. And his show, people think Polish music is all about polka, but his show was all about music from Poland, Polish culture. His wife Kazimiera was on the show with him. Josie Subotnik was on the show with him for a short time. Then his daughter Bożena was on with them till she got married, and Helena Roman. He died in 1987, and his wife and Helena Roman continued the show, I think, till 1990. And on a personal note, it is my fondest wish and hope to somehow bring the Polish Hour back on the air, so stay tuned. This, if you remember anything about, Randy Michaels was a regular top 40 DJ on Jet Radio. He was actually Slovak. His real name was Frank Basik. And but on Sundays he had a polka party, which I'm lucky to have a very few snippets of recordings of. By the way, if anybody has recordings of anybody's old Polish radio shows, I'm very interested. Another show that was around started in '69, Ron Slomsky's Polka Time. He had a band. He started on WWFM Saturday mornings, moved to WMDI, WHYP, and finally, when I was growing up, WPSE. I very fondly remember all the ads because they were the same every week. And I remember his theme song being Polka po naszemu, and he would always end with the Polish hymn Serdeczna Matko. And finally, I end with how a lot of how I got into this is my grandmother would tape record things. She recorded some Polish masses at St. Hedwig's, which you could hear in the exhibit, and then when my uncle got a polka show at Ganem, my uncle Gary Lonke, he's in the audience this evening. When my grandmother went crazy with cassette taping, and he had the show from 75 to 85. It became so popular it went from 2 hours to 3 hours. And in the early years, he also around Christmas did polka-thons, and that it still today has them having the tapes digitized. I realize how much that show means to me, and I don't want to knock anybody currently, but I have never heard a bit more well done, well planned out polka show, especially after 1982 when my mother joined the show, and my uncle had the show from June of '75 to June of 1985. So believe it or not, it's been 50 years. Now, just in conclusion, I know you're all getting antsy. A little bit about me. This is me when I was a little boy. My father's holding me up to the icon of Our Lady of Częstochowa at St. Hedwig's. This is my great-great-grandmother who came from Poland. She died when she was 99 years old. I was 4, so I do remember her. This is my grandparents, Chet and Reggie Longi. My grandmother taught me how to sing in Polish, to speak Polish. So did my grandfather. Not because they wanted me to, because I asked. And nobody ever forced me into this. This is my father, myself, and my grandmother Dorothy Desser Sulecki. My grandfather Bob died a few years before I was born. And I've been doing this for so many years that, believe it or not, in 1998, 27 years ago, I met the former president of Poland and Nobel Peace Prize winner, a leader of the Solidarity movement, Lech Wałęsa, when he came to Gdańsk to speak. And there's my picture with Lech. And before I finish, opening, this is the end, but opening night, if any of you were here, was so chaotic, and I don't know what happened, and I never had the chance to properly thank a few individuals, some of whom are here today, some of whom are not. I would like to thank both Adam Macrino and Teresa Gamble for welcoming me with open arms in the Hagen and giving me a new home here, even though I drove Teresa into retirement. All the people in the archives. Pauline's not here, but we tell you, I don't think we could function without her. Margaret's not here, but she did a wonderful job with the exhibit, designing all the boards and everything. And if I'm leaving anybody out, I apologize. Lastly, I would like to thank these two people. First, my father. You know, opening night, I got a lot of accolades and proclamations. I don't like to brag or talk about myself or my accomplishments. I don't have to, because my father will. I have a what do you call that? On 11th and Parade. Yeah. And my father, wherever he goes, shows people on his phone, this is my son, this is what they gave him. I mean, I've been in doctor's offices with him. He's showing the nurse. I think my father is trying to make it into Erie's next tourist stop. And finally, everything I've done since the age of 12 would have been impossible without my mother. Mom, I could never have done it without you. Thank you for always encouraging me never to give up and never saying no to me, although many times I feel you should have. And with that, I thank you very kindly for coming to my presentation, and I will now open the floor to questions.